Hi there. Last time we were looking at the armor plating and the instrumentation platform on the machine. So I think we can continue with some of that. One of the things we're going to have to add to this machine is a lot of radio antennas. It's probably going to have communication systems like Wi-Fi, GPS receivers for sure. The book mentions those. Some sort of long-range radio signal, or possibly even a satellite uplink. I'm not sure how those work. I know that there are satellite phones that use a phone function without a satellite dish, so maybe something like that. Either way, what I'm envisioning for starters is sort of a system of antennae at the rear of the bike. So I'm just going to start with a few simple cylinders. Let's do 12 rotation segments. Start with that, and what we can do is just the height, and this is probably going to be one of the many antennae that stick out from the side of this box, so kind of like the antenna on the Wi-Fi router that you probably have in your home. So let's put one there, and let's group this so it has a null object as its parent. Let's move the null object down to where we think the base would be, and we can then call this an antenna. Let's say Wi-Fi, or more appropriately, I guess, 2.4 gigahertz. And we can then create an instance. Let's put another one behind it, and then a third copy of the same thing on the other side. So it's just to give the look of diversity. Now we have these antennas, and because they're an instance, we can go back to the original and start modeling it a little bit. So we're going to start with the cylinder, that's fine. But the first thing I'll do is convert it to an editable object, and then go up to the top. We're probably going to have to select all the points, right click and say optimize. That makes everything solid. And then we can just select this loop of edges up here. First UL for loop selection, and then I can press B for B is bridge. I really wanted MS for bevel, and we do no subdivisions, create n-gons, that's fine. All we want to do is round the top off a little bit like that, and then these antennas usually get a little bit fatter halfway down, so we can use our knife tool in loop mode. And let's cut it right there, and then we can take our rectangular selection and fatten it out a little bit. So now that we have that, it kind of looks more like these antennas do. The next thing we'll need to do is select the polygons at the bottom, and since we're in Cinema 4D R13, we can actually just hold Control and scale along the XZ. It creates new faces, and then we can move to the Move tool and hold Control and scale out. And we get the base of the antenna. It's usually brass, I think, in the ones that I've seen. Now we can create a cube, and we put the cube as a child of the antenna Wi-Fi null. Then, using the object position, we can zero it all out. So the cube's origin is the same of our null, and then we can scale the cube down, and we get the fitting that it's also typically like a brass fitting that this comes from. And just to sell the effect, we just create one more cylinder, scale it down, and then we can do the same thing. We place it in the antenna Wi-Fi, and we change its position to 0. I think we only need about 8 rotation segments on that, and we do not need any caps, so we can turn those off. We should also want it along the x-axis, and then we can put that as the part that travels to whatever electronic component it's linked to. And what we can do is we can take our instance and actually push it into the housing, and then we can come over here on this side and take the other instance and just rotate it 180 degrees. Now here's a little trick. If you didn't want to rotate it, you could instead scale it, but that actually comes with its own problems. So what you would do is, I think the easiest way is to go to the chord tab and set its X scale to -1, and it flips it around. So that's fine, except technically the normals are reversed on this object now. So if we turned on back face culling, okay, we don't see anything there, but I believe if you convert it to an editable object, those faces may be reversed. So that's just something to keep in mind. So instead, let's leave it as +1, and let's just rotate it 180 degrees. That looks good. So now we have a few antennas on the rear of the machine. That's fine, except we're probably going to want some other sized antennas as well. Let's just create a generic looking cylindrical antenna. This one should also have 12 rotation segments to begin with. And if we go from the side view, this antenna will be more of a heavy-duty style antenna, the kind that you might typically see on a marine vessel. So this is a 12-sided antenna right here. Let's put it off to the side. I have a reason for that. And without getting into too much detail, we are just going to do that same technique we did before, where we press C to convert it to an editable object. And then because these aren't connected, so we can look right inside of the cylinder, we have to select all and run the optimize command. Now they're all connected. So we can take our cylinder's top and we can control click to move it up, and then we can scale that down a little bit. And now let's control scale to move it in, and then control move a little bit more to move it up. I think that's fine for now. But what I do want to do is bevel these two loops of edges. So we can get the loop selection. That flyout menu, you get that by holding down V, and I'm still holding V, and then I can just hover my mouse to what tool I want, and I can release, and I have it. So I can go MS to get my bevel, and then I'm just going to, bevel it slightly. Now that we have that base for our more traditional looking antenna, we can actually create the antenna using a helix and then a straight piece of wire. So what we can do is go to our helix object. Cinema 4D provides a primitive for this. Scale it down a bit, and we need to change its orientation. So by default it is XY, but we actually want XZ, so it goes upwards. And then we want to transfer it to this object. So I believe we can go, let's see, let's try to find this. I believe that they moved this in R13. I know it used to be under a different menu. I'm not sure where they put it, but the command is called transfer. I'm just not sure. There we go. So it's under arrange objects transfer. And what this allows you to do is, with the existing helix selected, we can either click on an object in the scene. You can see this line sort of darting towards objects as I hover near them. So I can hover over that cylinder I created and click, and it puts the helix right on it. And then I can select my scale tool, scale it down, and from the side view we can I'm having a bit of problems with my keyboard shortcuts. I actually got a new keyboard, so it's not as noisy as my old one, but I'm still getting used to it. So let's just create this helix on the outside of this little nub that I've left. And we can then begin to tweak the settings of the helix. So we can change its height. We probably want it to be about 6 inches tall. Well, that's really tall. Maybe 4 inches. And then we change its end angle of rotation until we get a nice tight coil that we're looking for. That looks good. And then there's actually some other settings. So there's the radial bias, which you can change, and height bias. So the height bias is quite interesting. It allows you to tighten the coils near the base or the top more. I think we actually do want a height bias of maybe 25%, so the coils near the base are tighter. And once we've got this, we can start to create a sweep NURBS out of it. So here's a little trick. If you hold down the Alt key or the Option key, I believe on a Mac, and you select a generator, it's actually going to make the currently selected object, the helix, be a child of the generator. And it actually matches their coordinate system. So by doing that command, my helix is already a child of the sweep NURBS. I don't need to do anything fancy there. Then I can just create a circle or an end side. I like to use an end side occasionally. It's sometimes more convenient than a circle. So I have my circle right here. For things like a sweep or an extrude, the circle's coordinate system should be XY, so that's correct. And we can scale this end side down and then place it in the helix. And so the smoothing is a little bit off, but that's okay. We can just increase the number of sides to 8. And then we can go to the edge mode, and we can see that we need to scale our end side down a bit. And we need less subdivisions here. This is way too many. So currently it is subdivision of 100. So let's see how this works. 0 means it looks like there's pretty much very few subdivisions. And this is the subdivision of the actual helix. So we want to make sure there's enough subdivisions there. Let's put that back up to 100. But then intermediate points, if we set that to none, you get just the helix's subdivisions. And then you can add other subdivision in between. Now, I'm not convinced we need to add intermediate points. I think we can just increase the number of subdivisions in the helix itself, maybe to 180. And so what we have now is we have this coil that's kind of the base part of an antenna. And to make this look a little bit more interesting, what we can do is we can hit C on the helix to convert it to an editable object. And then we can select the final point of the helix and control drag to move it upwards. Actually, I think I just control clicked is all I did. So I control click to move it up. But I want to make sure it's at the exact same position of the center. So what I can do is I can move it to the center right here, move it down, and then control click again. Make sure that new point is in the center as well. And we now have sort of a more interesting looking antenna. Now the interesting part about this form here is that it doesn't look very gradual. It looks like it goes from a rigid coil straight into an upward point, and it looks that way because that's what it is. But what we'd like to do is add a deformer to smooth that out. So what I'm going to do is, with my helix selected, I'm going to let's try, is it a control click on a taper deformer. Yeah, so that doesn't seem to have done what I thought it would do, but we can just use the alt click as well. So alt click on the taper. The taper is the child. That's not how I want it. I want the taper to be a child. I'm sure there's a shortcut for that, but now it's at the right position. So I can now scale it down. We have our taper deformer. Now the way this deformer works is when you, I'm just going to rotate it to this. No, that stays. Yeah, I need to rotate it, otherwise I can't use the interactive handle. So when you drag that handle, it squeezes the contents of the object. So if I make my taper look like that and then move it down to the top part of this coil, it's going to start to squish it. So that looks a lot more realistic, and what we can do is we can make the taper object a little bit taller on the y-axis. And what this essentially lets us do is taper the spring down so it's a more gradual transition. The taper object also allows you to adjust the curvature. So it can be straight or it can be bulged. So there's some pretty cool features there. But the end result is that we have this little sort of antenna. That's a good looking one as well. It looks pretty high tech. Maybe we'd like to add a bulb at the end of it. I'm not sure if that's necessary or if that's usually done, but I'm going to add it anyway. Now, because I was transferring objects to this cylinder earlier on, it actually remembered my last used object in the transfer option. So I didn't actually have to pick an object, I just had to press transfer and click, or rather press apply. So I can use different types of spheres for this. A standard sphere is going to be good, but I want fewer subdivisions because we don't need all that geometry. And so that looks pretty good. And we have a sweep NURBS and a cylinder. As usual, I like to group things. So what we can do is group the cylinder, move its origin, move the origin of the group, that is. And so we have the cylinder, we have a sweep NURBS, and we have a sphere. And these all make up this antenna. So I can probably select the deformer and make it invisible in the editor. And now we have another antenna, so that looks pretty good. I almost feel like it needs to be fatter. So what we can do is select that entire null with this antenna, so we'll call it a spring antenna. I'm not really sure what else to call it. I'm not sure what the official term for it is. Okay. You probably saw a bit of progress jump ahead in the video and wondered what happened there. Well, I had a bit of a problem with the recording. I paused the recording accidentally. Well, I intentionally paused the recording, but I accidentally forgot to resume it. The good news is that I didn't do too much in that space of time. It was about 10 or 12 minutes, but I can really quickly recap what I did. So the first thing I did is that I made this this sort of springy antenna a little bit more beefy. Getting some weird intersections down here, so maybe we can adjust that later. But I essentially scaled this object up. That's all I did. I selected the spring antenna and I scaled it up. The next thing I do is I scaled these guys up a little bit, and I rotated them so that they're swept back a little bit. This was just sort of a cosmetic decision. There was no other reason that I did it that way. And well, the final thing I did, probably the biggest thing that you're seeing different, is that I created this whip antenna. And I was explaining that I saw this antenna mounted to off-road trucks like Humvees and other military vehicles. And I did a little bit of reading, and it turns out that the angle of this antenna provides better reception because it covers a wider range like that. Now, I read it on a forum somewhere, so I'm not sure if the guy knew what he was talking about. But either way, I'm familiar with seeing antennas like this mounted on these vehicles. So the construction of this is really simple. I started off with the same base I used for the spring antenna, and I just scaled it up. and then I created a cone. Now this was kind of a cool tip I showed, because the cone object in Cinema 4D has sort of a hidden property. Everybody knows you can create a cone, make it taller, and you can adjust the radius of its base. But you can actually adjust the radius of its top and make it not a cone anymore. Now it's sort of a tapered cylinder. So you can actually create a tapered cylinder with your top and bottom radii, and then you can use that. And the cool thing about that is you can interactively adjust the number of height segments without converting it to an editable object. So it's pretty useful for situations like that. So that's what I used right here, which is why I have a cone, and I can still adjust the height segments to make it high or low resolution. And the other thing I did was added a bend deformer to it. So what we have here is we have a bend deformer. I can unhide it so we can all see it. It's just a purple field that gets bent. And similar to what I did with the pneumatic kickstands early in the earlier videos, you know, you can use the bend interactively to bend this, and we can sort of figure out what angle we think this looks best at. I mean, we can tie it right down to the tail right there, or we can actually have it sort of sweeping up like this. I'm not really sure, but what I will do is create a tie down for it. So I'm not sure how the end of these antennas are usually fixed to things, but I'm guessing it's going to need to be some sort of an eyelet. So let's go ahead and add an eyelet so that we can tie it down. And I am recording this time, I'm sure of it. So let's turn off the bend, and let's just go up to the end of the straight antenna. And what we can do is simply create a cube and work from there. So we've created our cube, and I'm just going to use the Chamfer Tool and click the cylinder. Now the cube is at the same position. So we can scale that down, move it up to the end, and let's remember that it's probably going to be like a cap, maybe crimped or bolted onto the end of it. So it's going to be like that. And let's show the 3D view to get a better idea. Something like that, maybe. Again, I'm out of my comfort zone. I don't really know much about these kinds of antennas, but I do know that in 3D we can simply fake it. So I'm just going to create a bracket, something that looks like what I think it would look like, and it's probably going to be flared out a little bit, and let's see. Just want to make sure I'm going right through the object. Yep. So let's go back to shaded mode. Let's make sure this has a good area for us to put a hole through. So what we can do now is select these edges. Round it off a little bit. You know, the good part about me messing up with recording this video is that now we can actually show more stuff than would have fit in a regular length video. So that's me trying to see the silver lining. So what we can do is just scale this down to make that sort of eyelet that I imagine it would be. And we can use the bridge tool. Press B and we can bridge this gap so it creates this geometry here like we want it. It looks pretty damn good. And we can adjust the Phong shading. You know what? I think we have extra geometry right here. That's why we're getting a hard edge. Let's try selecting all the points and optimizing. Yep, there were some points on top of each other right there. So we took care of that. So that's now the end of this antenna. So what we can do now is turn our bend back on. Whoop. This cube, let's call it eyelet, actually needs to be at the end of the cone. So eyelet and bend can both be children of the cone, and it should bend both of them, just like that. So now we can string some tie down through there. Now we don't exactly have a bracket for this to fit on yet, so we'll leave the object we create editable so that we can change that in the future. So from the side view, we can use a linear spline, and this linear spline should have about 4 points. It should be the first point where it ties onto the motorcycle, the second point where it hits the eyelet, the third point where it hits the other side of the eyelet, and the fourth point right around the same area as the first. So these 2 points should be far apart. In other words, one should be on the left and the other should be on the right. I want to make them the same distance apart. We can just select both and make sure that their center is at 0, like that. And then we can go up here and do the same thing. So this one should be on the left, this one should be on the right. We can select both of them and make their X position 0, and make their size on every axis except the horizontal one, the X one, 0. So their Y and Z size would be 0. And now we can scale it down so that they're right at the edge. We can do the same positioning trick with these guys. We just select both and make everything except their X 0. So now we actually have that tie down. So what we can do is put our spline right there. Actually, since the tension is here, it's probably going to be up at this end. And then we can create our sweep. So we're going to create a sweep NURBS again. So we can Alt or Option click a sweep NURBS. It puts it at the same position, although the position of our spline was down there at the world center. Maybe we want to change that. Let's move the spline up there, and let's move the sweep NURBS up there as well. Now we just need to create an end side, and I'll put the end side in the sweep NURBS, and we get a giant cable that is way too big. So we can scale it down and then move the end side up to this area, just so we can have all of our parts in one zone. There we go. And this is going to be pretty fine, like some cable or some sort of a line holding it down. And let's give it 8 sides so it's more smooth. And then we can go to our spline and tweak that a little bit. So first thing I'd want to do is select these points and sort of, how about we put them right there, right at the edges of that instrumentation box back here. So if we scale this out a little bit, we can sort of tie them down right there. And then we zoom up to this area, and we can select these 2 points, and we can sort of tweak them, like they need to be a bit wider, and they also need to sit on the bracket, so we're just making it more precise. And then we can use the Chamfer Tool. If you've been following my 5-minute tip series, you should already know about this. And with the Chamfer Tool, we can take a straight point of a spline and just round it. So we can just round it a little bit, and we get that look. It looks damn near perfect. And we can give this maybe 15 points, 15 degrees, 15 or 20 degrees adaptive, so it doesn't create too much geometry for us. And that kind of looks like our tied down whip antenna. I'm pretty happy about that. So starting to look a little bit more high-tech near the rear of the machine, more like a surveillance drone or a military vehicle. So I hope you guys enjoyed this one. Sorry for that mix-up near the middle of the video, but hopefully I was able to turn it around and add more value to the video given that opportunity. So until next time, I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.